Welcome to the October 8th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. I'm Alice Taylor and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. Due to the hybrid nature of tonight's meeting, I'd like to start by providing some guidelines. We'll have participants in the room as well as those attending virtually. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Those of us in the room, if you'd like to raise your hand, put your name up. Those online, you can hit the raise your hand button when you'd like to be acknowledged for speaking. If you have technical issues, try joining the meeting using a different device or use the calling information. We'll summarize agreement around recommendations at the end of each topic and note if there is any dissent. Stacey, can you take attendance?
Tom Anderson is here, stepped out of the room. Nancy Davidson.
Here.
Tommy DeVoe.
Here.
Praj Kapandi.
Here.
Hiram Khan has an excused absence. Nina Toon has an excused absence. Dominic Williams has an excused absence. Dixie Bear. Alex Lee Tigner. Here. Ann Newcomb. Here. Keith Gonzalez.
Here.
John Smith.
Here.
And John and Ann will be sitting as regular members tonight, and we have quorum.
Did I miss out?
You're number one on my list, so we did, but we noted you were here.
Great. Thank you much for forbearance.
You can say here.
You're number one.
Alphabetical.
And stuff. So moving on to approval of the minutes from September 10th meeting. Any comments? Move to approve those. And then do we have any public comments tonight?
No, we did not have any written public comment on tonight's topics, and we do not have anyone in the room.
I thought there was somebody signed up.
That was from our old meeting.
Okay.
So, but yes, thank you.
All right, we'll move straight into our agenda items. Then we have 3 agenda items tonight, plus a report. The first one, David's going to present on the sustainable building and infrastructure policy. This was presented on last month. This is a recap of any changes that were made, and we'll have a discussion and vote for either approving sending it to council committee or not. We'll go over the climate action plan update, some initial input and overarching items, and then we'll run through the annual report and self-assessment for some discussion before it is sent out. So David, we'll pass it to you for the first time.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for having me back today to chat about this. I'm going to do a shorter summary version of the presentation I gave last month. Note the few changes that were made based on board feedback in September, and then we can open the floor for comments and questions. So just as a reminder, staff are proposing changes to the sustainable building and infrastructure policy. And this is based on actions listed in the climate action plan, as well as the sustainable building action strategy. The environmental board role tonight is to ask questions about the policy and then decide on whether or not to recommend moving forward with a recommendation to council. As a recap of the context, the current sustainable building and infrastructure policy is from 2004. It's a bit outdated at this point. And it was listed as a priority action in the 2018 Sustainable Building Action Strategy, as well as the 2021 Climate Action Plan. Buildings are one of the primary sources of greenhouse gas emissions in government operations, about 48% in 2022. And then just as more context on this, right, infrastructure projects go beyond buildings themselves. Thinks about much wider array of projects that the city works on. And so when we think about incorporating sustainable principles into those infrastructure projects. There are likely going to be greenhouse gas emission savings associated with those, but there's also many other environmental benefits of incorporating sustainability principles into those infrastructure projects. In fall of 2024 and spring of 2025, Cascadia Consulting developed recommendations and a report on how staff could update the sustainable building and infrastructure policy. Those recommendations came based on interviews with staff, discussions with senior leadership team at the city. They came to the environmental board for input as well. And much of the proposed changes came out of the holistic process of discussion of this assessment. Back in September, when we previously brought this to the environmental board, there were a number of different comments, questions, and feedback that I just wanted to touch on as we think about updating it, the updated version for today. So one, there was some questions related to clarifications on the phased approach of the policy. The phased approach really came from the evaluation and analysis of policies in other jurisdictions, conversations with staff and leadership teams, the environmental board, and others. And the idea with this phased approach is that it allows for an initial phase that leans more on staff training, trial of tools such as a more significant use of the LEAD tool, as well as the Envision tool for infrastructure projects, and also some formalization of sustainability support for other departments to work sustainability principles into budgets for infrastructure projects and building projects. And this goes to the second point brought up by the board at the September meeting. The board asked for clearly stated action steps for staff to implement in 2030 or 2031. And so what we've done is we have two phases of review of the policy. One is a review of the policy in 2028, and then a review of the policy in 2031 again. And at each of those points, the idea is to evaluate how the phased approach is working, how the implementation of projects, toolkits is working for different projects, and deciding whether or not we need to make changes to this policy at another point. And so thinking about at those points, do we need to make the policy more stringent? Do we need to make it more clear for staff? What has worked and what has not worked in the pilot projects? Things like that. And so there's the two steps included for evaluation of the policy, so that we don't have another situation like the 2004 policy where we're now 2 decades later updating it now. And then I do want to also just mention that the environmental board, that board members asked for clarification on why the policy was focused on municipal buildings and infrastructure projects instead of community-wide projects. And that discussion really focuses on using the municipal code to incorporate updates specifically in that code for community-wide projects, and using this policy as a means to provide more guidance to city staff and to explore opportunities to go beyond code. And then related to waste diversion, board members asked for some clarification on what the goals were in related to waste diversion within the policy. And so last time we provided a little bit of clarification on that, and I can go into more details around that today if we'd like. So just thinking about next steps of the policy, this winter we would be updating the sustainable building and infrastructure policy if we can move it to council for approval, and if council decides to approve it, then the policy would be updated this winter, and we would focus on updating guidance and identifying pilot projects. In 2026 to 2027, we'd be implementing the policy, working on pilot projects and really seeing how we can incorporate these sustainability principles into projects across the city. And then the other two next steps here are those review steps or evaluation time. So in 2028 would be reviewing the policy, and in 2031 would be reviewing the policy and deciding whether or not it's really meeting our goals, if it is helping us with incorporating sustainability principles into these building projects, into these infrastructure projects, or if we need to be rethinking this policy and making some adjustments at that point. As a brief summary of the proposed policy changes, I went through them much more in depth last time. But so the first item is that it formalizes sustainability team support. And that means supporting departments across the city with staff training, working with departments across the city on budgets to make sure that we are budgeting correctly to incorporate sustainability principles into these building and these infrastructure projects. The second area is to provide much more robust guidance related to new buildings and major retrofits. So updating some of those definitions, providing clarity around what is expected when a major retrofit or renovation occurs, or a new building, and then also thinking about the different size of the building. So providing different guidance based on the size of that building. It provides much more clear, or it provides updated guidance related to infrastructure projects at the city. It introduces the Envision toolkit, which is one of the national standards, is the main national standard for infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure evaluation and certification. So it introduces that Envision toolkit as the means to evaluate whether or not our infrastructure projects are more or less sustainable, and thinking about ways that we can incorporate more sustainability principles into those projects. And it requires that we identify a pilot project to test the Envision toolkit with in the next couple of years. And then finally, it updates some waste diversion practices and asks for set some goals around waste diversion at city facilities, existing city facilities, as well as waste diversion for all city projects, including those that require demolition, as well as infrastructure projects that might not require any demolition. So it sets some goals there that would be working towards. And with that, that is my summary of the policy again. We can go into more depth on any of the items, but I'd at this point welcome any questions or comments.
David? All right, well, questions or comments on the policy as it's presented?
David knows I'm coming. And I had a conversation today. And I apologize for not being here last month. And I really did not have an opportunity at this until I got back from being out of the country. So I apologize. But I feel like we can do more. And I think David and I had a question, comment. But before I get into doing more, I recommend a little bit of a structural change to the document. Okay. And we talk about goals, and goals are kind of incorporated in definitions and different places. And you have a purpose, but it would be great if we put the goals. What are we trying to achieve with this policy? Because you kind of have to search, okay? So if you put that as a section before you get to definitions and underneath purpose, I think it would be clear. And if we're measuring that in what you said, 2030 and 2031, or your timeframes, I'm sorry, I didn't get it right. But at least then we know that's what we're targeting for, and we're all going for whatever the goals are that we're trying to achieve. So that's kind of one of the structural changes I recommend to the document. But that one was pretty simple, so I didn't bring it up when we were talking today. But I think finding the goals right up front would really be helpful. The second piece of this is that this works really well in general for buildings, but it doesn't work so well for infrastructure. And infrastructure includes roads, parks, pipelines, all kinds of stuff. And it feels very, when you put infrastructure in the words with all the buildings, it doesn't always work. And in some ways, we can do more in infrastructure, and those aren't even brought up. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples, okay, for consideration. One of them is the park that just went into downtown Issaquah, the one right on Front Street in Sunset. It's got a little water feature that has energy consumption. It's got water, so we're using a resource. It's got a very linear project. It's got a park and sidewalks. And that would be a great opportunity to see recycled concrete, demonstrate what we're talking about right in the heart of downtown Issaquah, outside the senior center and everything else. If we had something we were trying to achieve with this. And that was an infrastructure project. It really was not a facilities project. You couldn't get solar on it or anything like that. But I question if we were really trying to be sustainable and reduce water use, if that project would have gone forward with the fountain, because we're using energy all the time for that little fountain. So I think we could do more. So I think the infrastructure, I look at the roadways and the sidewalks we tear up. Do we use green vehicles or any green equipment or anything else? We don't even assess that. How much of the material that's removed from a sidewalk when it's demoed gets recycled? The rebar that comes out, anything like that. So what I'm suggesting is that perhaps we have one section that's dedicated to buildings and perhaps a section to the more linear projects and what we're trying to achieve with each of them. I just think that there's a different way of thinking. And while I appreciate the checklist that's there, the checklist doesn't force anything. And if we're trying to change people's habits and trying to be more climate friendly and environmentally friendly, I think this is an opportunity to do something. And I don't think we're doing a lot, particularly on infrastructure projects. We really are doing a great job. Well, not a great job, but we're doing a better job on buildings. Do you see what I'm saying? They're really easy to capture and to see how they're doing. What we're not doing as good a job, in my opinion, this is just me, is on the roadways, sidewalks, and those are the guys that you now need to start working towards getting attention on, instead of waiting until 2030 to kind of get that second look at it. So that's my suggestion at this point, and I'm sorry to dump all that right now. You can respond if you want, but I think those are the things that I think we really should be trying to get some additional stuff out of as we move forward. If we really want to do something about climate change. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that is all great points. And I think where we are trying to go with how the policy is written is to identify the training opportunities for public works staff or park staffs to really think about upskilling those staff members specifically related to sustainability skills in their design processes and their RFQs and the actual construction where we can. And then the other goal with identifying a pilot project right off the bat in 2026 and 2027 for use of the Envision certification is for testing out what does a holistic tool like Envision, how does that actually impact what does the sustainability practices of an infrastructure project. And the Envision toolkit was specifically developed as, the way I'll describe it is kind of it's the equivalent of LEED, but for projects that don't have buildings, right? So the reason we are recommending using the Envision toolkit is because it can be used for parks and roadways and sidewalks and all sorts of different infrastructure projects. And the way it works is you kind of dig into what parts of the Envision toolkit would apply to any given project, and then determine whether or not the project can be certified based on the amount of sustainable practices incorporated into that project. So the idea there is that by leveraging this tool, it could be kind of a standard tool for our infrastructure projects at the city and then applied to multiple different types of infrastructure projects. That was some of the theory around where we went there.
Should I go over to John?
John.
Yeah.
Just a question about policy. It looks like it's for buildings. It's broken down into 3 different groups. One for buildings less than 5,000 square feet. And I think there's just sort of like, it's a policy. It's not necessarily firm guidelines. But for 5 to 10,000 square foot, then their regulations are, they're more, you have to abide by those, right?
So the way the buildings are broken up is based on the size of the building, as you mentioned, and kind of, and so it would apply to a building depending on if it's a completely new building or if it is having a major renovation, and we have some definitions around that. So for buildings that are up to 5,000 square feet, we essentially, the policy recommends just using the best sustainability principles that we can for those small buildings.
Okay.
For 5,000 to 10,000 square feet, the policy requires staff to align with LEED Platinum, so a high standard of certification for buildings, but it doesn't require the city to get those buildings certified as LEED Platinum as a means, just because that certification costs a lot of money. And so this is a means to have those projects align with LEED Platinum, but save some money in the process. And then anything beyond 10,000 square feet based on current city code would have to become a LEED Platinum
Okay, I
certified.
understand now. Okay,
building.
okay. And do you have a pilot project in mind?
We don't have a pilot project in mind. I think over the next 5 years, there would be some projects that would fall into probably the 5,000 to 10,000 square foot bucket, and then the 10,000 square foot
Okay.
bucket. So one of the ones that's being discussed is future city hall space needs, and potentially a reworking of the current city hall to turn it all into a police station. And so depending on kind of how some of those projects shake out over the next 5, 10 years, whatever it might be, this policy would apply to this.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Were you asking also about an infrastructure pilot?
No,
project?
I was really just asking about the building.
We have several building renovations.
Yeah, there's some other new
Gibson.
buildings, which is done. Oh, the Gibson House, sorry,
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, anyways.
Not good.
Okay, thank you.
Guys put them up kind of at the same time.
Super quick, I think, so, and you come here, so with the Envision tool, so I know it has a lot of probably has a lot of ideas, and tools for people, and does it get specific to, the area, say King County or Washington? Or is it just, generic for the whole United States?
So the Envision toolkit is more generic for the entire United States. So it sets, depending on what part of the toolkit you're looking at, right? You can get points or that, it encourages you to have certain types of leadership meetings and things like that. But then it also can get as specific as looking at certain percents of recycled material in construction material, right? And so all of that is not specific to Washington, but is a national, it's a national tool, kind of like LEED. With our consultants, we did look at the King County green building scorecard, green infrastructure scorecard.
Might be a good one.
Yeah, and it was actually developed before Envision existed, and so King County kind of was setting the stage of green infrastructure with that scorecard. But one of the reasons it was not recommended we move forward with that is because King County has multiple staff members dedicated to
Yeah,
incorporating that, and so the benefit with Envision is, since it's this national tool, we can, work with the national network to actually get projects certified, get training, things like that. And it is a little bit easier with our more limited staff capacity.
But maybe King County could be a resource for you.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So just as an aside, Nancy reminded me of this. So when we were first coming up with the ICAP, we were talking about different things, and I'd heard of concrete cure, where CO2 that's sequestered from the atmosphere is injected into the concrete and it makes it stronger. So then I went ahead and researched around, and Stoneway actually has, at that time, this was a few years ago now, had the bricks. They make them into bricks, so you can buy the bricks. Not necessarily concrete that you would lay down, but things have changed. So who knows what they have now. But that's probably not something that maybe the national tool would say that, because it's probably not it's not in all the states.
Yeah, so the Envision tool won't necessarily go to that level of depth of, use a specific concrete or anything, but it will have criteria related to identifying low carbon concrete, or really digging into the materials used in an infrastructure project. And so the idea with the toolkit generally is that by starting with those conversations, we're getting to incorporate those sustainable principles of low carbon concrete or concrete that sequesters carbon into the design of whatever project we are piloting it with, or using the toolkit.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that Washington State uses recycled concrete. So hopefully, is there any way that we can write that in, that I trust you guys, you stay on top of all this, but like getting down to that detail, I think is really important, because if we're going to be leaders, we have to be, listening to all the podcasts and learning about all of the, the things that are just coming out, the cutting edge stuff, and then taking the time to research to find it, or asking a volunteer to do it. So it'd be great if that was like, if we could do that. Is there any way that could be written in somehow?
Using recycled concrete.
So
specifically,
yeah, just
or
getting down to that kind of detail where you're using bricks that are sequestering carbon, trying to be on the cutting edge of how we can build things sustainably and be, sequestering carbon in our products, or using less carbon, or, using the recycled stuff.
Yeah, I would say getting to that level of detail in the policy would require probably a fair amount of staff evaluation and assessment. We would start to get into, and part of the way the policy is written is with these evaluation points and trying out projects, we get to see whether or not some of these different methods, such as concrete or whatever we're trying, it works for us at the city. As we start to get really specific like that right off the bat, we'd have to do a fair amount of analysis to determine, what is possible for different projects, as well as what the cost implication would be on projects. And so I would say writing that level of detail right off the bat would be difficult. And I think probably
So maybe
require more
just
staff time.
being the best example possible, and using cutting edge materials to either sequester or lower our carbon, maybe verbiage like that.
So something that kind of some language around stepping out and leading, and kind of using the best available.
Yeah, because it's hard to know stuff's out there unless you're like really listening to a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I was just gonna note, I think getting to Nancy's point around the restructuring, but probably I would recommend staying away from that level of detail in the actual policy, because we want to be flexible. We want to stay up with the cutting edge technology and resources and products.
but capturing some of those concepts in the goals and purpose, so that that's then directing us towards what products, what materials that we're using. And then as we go through some of the pilot projects, we can identify kind of best resources, best practices for different types of infrastructure projects, and we can share, make sure staff are sharing that out and that we're finding those best products that are available.
Yes, I continue to be troubled by using Envision as just a checklist without any team. And checklists are a nice thing to do, but it doesn't mean it will change what you do. It won't change how you hire a contractor or how they'll do their work. Unless there's a little more teeth through the goals or how we do this. And so I think we need to do more. I think waiting until 2030 to get to a point where we're talking about recycling materials, better practices in our construction industry. And when we hire contractors, we're just waiting too long. And I know it's hard, but I think we really should be trying to do it now and assessing how we do. And if it's not right, we can come back next year and we can reevaluate because we missed it. But I think by putting it off to a pilot project in 2027 and then evaluating that project, we won't do anything on this until 2030. And if that's what the council wants to do, that's one thing, but I think we've really missed what we're trying to achieve with this. I mean, that's just.
No, just the first evaluation is in 2028, which is not much, in 2 years earlier than 2030.
And that was to align with the budget so that we could put a pilot project in the 27 budget and then evaluate in 28 and evaluate that project in 27 and evaluate.
But couldn't you use one of the projects that are in the capital program right now that the council's voting on and you run it through this Envision process? And I mean, it's in design and planning, so you can start to do something and see how it works. But if you wait and don't start anything till 2028 and wait for a budget cycle, I mean, you've missed a real big opportunity.
Yeah, understood. I think concerns are around the cost implications with those projects and needing to add in the additional costs for meeting the Envision criteria.
I think we, to some extent, we can start using Envision earlier as well. And I think part of, if we go back 2 slides on the, yeah, so on the timeline, right? So after policy adoption, we would start working with our mainly public works and parks team to identify upcoming projects and new budget cycles, but also Envision is really great at incorporating it as early as you can. And so we could try and incorporate it in projects, if possible, as early as 2026. And you know, the Envision process is a long process. It goes through the entire project implementation. So a project that you start using it in 2026, that could be a project that stretches into 27 as well. And so the idea is to give us about 2 full years of evaluation about how using Envision as a toolkit to incorporate sustainability into these products, this infrastructure projects.
Just a quick question. This is all about city-owned properties and municipal buildings. And is there a vision of somehow developing this and then moving it into the private sector? I mean, it seems like the municipal aspect of this is tiny in comparison to what's going to happen to the Issaquah area in the next 30 years.
I think so.
Are there any plans to put these kind of policies in place for the builders who are putting up new apartment buildings and things like that?
So there were sustainable building principles incorporated into Title 18. So any building in the city over 10,000 square feet has to become LEED Platinum. Right, so that is already a community, both a municipal and community requirement. And one of the things we've discussed in the past is it's seeking to go back to what some of those sustainable building requirements are in city code that would apply again to community buildings as well as city buildings, or projects generally. So to your point, right, this policy is focused on municipal projects, and we would anticipate using the Issaquah Municipal Code as our means to incorporate regulations and requirements for community-wide projects as well. And then the other thing I would note, right, we have some buildings at the city and some bigger buildings, but those infrastructure projects are where we're gonna maybe see even bigger impact, or the community might see bigger impacts just as we update our parks system and work on road projects. And you know, as you think about the infrastructure that the city maintains at the city, or the city, as you think about the infrastructure projects across the city, it is a much larger footprint.
And you said that the Issaquah Municipal Code already covers the 10,000 square foot.
Correct.
They have to be LEED certified buildings.
Any building above 10,000 square feet has to be LEED Platinum certified.
So that's on the, what was called the white list or whiteboard for Title 18. So that is something that we'll be revisiting and see if we want to integrate other sustainable building principles into city code. City code also covers demolition and construction waste. That's something I know our solid waste analyst wants to come and talk with the board about at some point, seeing how we can strengthen, especially enforcement around that. So the code does also get into some of the infrastructure waste aspects associated with other projects, but it's something that will be next year as well.
Okay.
See how we can strengthen it.
That's good. When we were doing our bathroom remodels, I had to go through the garbage and sort everything out.
Oh.
Tom, did you have anything?
Well, my question was very similar to Jonathan's, as to how we apply the lessons learned to the Title 18 and all that. As to, is there a timeline laid out that shows how that process would work? I think that's, I'm envisioning something more complex than is necessary at this stage. This is why I went through talking about it. But okay, so yeah, we're going to do this pilot project, and then we're going to take the lessons learned from that and improve for municipal buildings, and then we're going to also then feed it into the next phase of Title 18. So anyway, that's where I was going. But I think we've got to explore that whole process.
And I will say, I think this policy works with Title 18. So any updates that we're making with Title 18 will raise up this policy. And, you know, as we raise up this policy, it'll inform what we can do to raise up Title 18.
My questions go back to the Envision checklist there. So I just briefly looked for information about it, and there's different levels, just like there's different levels on LEED. Is there one that we're working towards, or is it the verified lowest one with the checklist, or are we going for gold or silver with it as well?
We haven't listed out a specific grade we're aiming for as part of this policy update now.
Would that get to more of what Nancy's asking for, with more definition around what we're requiring our projects, infrastructure projects to meet? If we know what level, since we're going for the platinum with our buildings and things like that, or as high as we can with the less. I feel like this board and potentially for the council presenting what we aim for with the Envision would be this closer to having identified the teeth behind.
Can I explore that?
I don't know if you guys missed that.
I think it would help. I mean, I think telling people, you know, kind of what you're trying to achieve and what your goal is, instead of to do a checklist. It's always a little better.
I don't know, I feel like one of the things we're grasping at is, I think people are really familiar with LEED certifications, and we're not familiar with what Envision actually is looking looking at and what it's, the checklist is saying as we're going through it. So that might be what we're struggling to understand, like, we actually saying what to do as part of these infrastructure projects. We're not really working towards the minimum. Is it the minimum? There is certification on Envision, or is it the higher certification on Envision, which would require a lot more reusable things going into it?
I think we can certainly explore whether or not, or kind of how we could incorporate kind of a specific Envision goal within it of certification level there. And I think to your point, Envision is new to the city generally, and so that kind of goes a little bit towards why we're starting with training and everything else, as folks are familiar with LEED, and you mentioned LEED, and many folks working in building spaces know what that means. And so starting with the training, the incorporation of budget, and testing out how Envision would work, the idea is that it will give our sustainability staff, as well as parks and public works and other staff, an understanding around what does it really mean to achieve Envision certification of any level, and what can we strive for as best we can.
I appreciate that you've incorporated that, looking across the different departments and training and things like that. That's great to have included in this. I just want to make sure we have capacity on our sustainability team for that as well, because it seems like that could entail a lot of extra work for you to bring that out there. Wow. Any other comments or feedback on the policy as it's written? So it's in front of the board to approve it as is so to make a motion to approve it with the edits. Sorry, I'm screwing this up. Let's start over. So staff would like to get a motion to approve this to send to council committee for review as it's written. Our options are to have a motion to send it forward, or we can have a motion to send it some comments. Would anyone like to make a motion to move the policy to council?
We wouldn't have further discussion. You were kind of just saying.
I think we need to bring this back. That's my take on it. I think without bringing the goals into something concrete where you see the goals, having a little more look at this Envision piece, I think that's where I'm at. I don't think we're there yet.
I'm ready to go ahead and make a motion, but.
I mean, if you want to move to approve, I'll probably be a no. If you want to make a move to, I would move. I'll make a motion to bring this back next month for further discussion with the edits that have been requested by this committee. There's a motion on the table.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Sorry, John. I'll take one first.
I guess I'll second it, because I would either like to do that or have it with the changes that we were talking about. So like, I don't know what kind of problems it makes for you to extend it out another month, is that, does that?
We will not be able to get in front of, so we have to go to council committee first and then council. We will not be able to get to council at the end of the year.
Mhm.
So we will have a new council.
So what we can do is not approve it. And that can go to council. They can still present it to council as is, with us noting that we don't approve in our recommendations for changing it.
Mhm.
We can approve it and also include dissent discussion with it. Or we can say we don't approve it and we don't want it to move forward, so that would stall it.
Yeah. So our meeting next week is with council committee. I think we are interested in probably still going before council committee to get input and direction based on the input that we hear from tonight. That will be shared with them. But if the board wants significant changes, I think that will be a conversation with council committee, because right now the proposed policy meets the needs and comfort level of staff. Because David, our consultants, worked across all the department directors to come to some agreement. And so we will want some input from council committee on what they would like us to do. Some of them may want us to go further and work with the board over the next several months to shape this policy further. We probably need more resources. We'll need additional time. So we will probably have a conversation with council committee next week either way, and we can present the board feedback recommendation, but we'll probably need some direction from them.
Should we just talk?
Yeah.
Can we go over like the bullet points of what, like, I know that we wanted to put the goal first.
Yes, yeah, I think that would be good.
So it's gonna be some innovation, you know, going with innovative products or innovative, you know, with the intent of top cutting edge innovation. And then what were the other bullet points?
So I think what I heard as edits that we could likely incorporate without going back and requesting more time and resources to update the policy would be pulling out more of the goals and being clear around our goals in the purpose aspect of the policy update. Making more clear that this policy is intended to set the city as a leader using best available materials and equipment when feasible. And then the third piece was incorporating specific envision certification level, goal level that we are aiming towards in incorporating it for infrastructure projects over the next 2 years before the first evaluation period. I think those were the three that I heard that. And what was the other one? I'm sorry.
Separating out more building related.
Yes, separating it between.
Because they're so different. Can or can't do.
And so what we'd do with that, based on how it's written, would probably be a building section, an infrastructure section, and then a combined section that applies to both.
I think one other thing that I heard was, let's just do it. Like, why are we doing these little tiny pilot projects? Or maybe they'll be big pilot projects. This is something that Issaquah wants to do. So like, my way of doing it would just be, okay, look, we're going to do it, you know, rather than, oh, we're going to have these little pilot projects doing these things that we know we want to work toward, but we know that's our goal. Our higher goal is a city and a county and a state. And then in a few years, then we'll put it across everything. Why not just do it now?
So just adding to Anne's point, you know, and also what Nancy was saying, before, that if we want to do the pilot project, why not do it now? Why not pull out that and look at it right now? But so just to add to that, I feel like then they should be able to present it to the current city council this year, as opposed to again wait till next year to review. So I don't know if there is an option to send it with the comments and, you know, again, ask for us to review in a month, but still let it, you know, let the progress begin on it. Because I'm worried that if we again ask, if we do not approve and just ask it to be for us to review again in a month, then again, it goes to the next city council. And I don't know what the consequences of that is, but I'm guessing it still halts the process and make it more slow. That's just what I think. So is there my point was, is there an option for us to approve with the comments and still ask us to review that in a month, to what Nancy was asking?
I think to Nancy's point, please correct me if I'm wrong. So the kind of the 4 items that we mentioned, we could make changes into the policy and bring those changes to the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee. The suggestion to not to start applying Envision essentially to all infrastructure projects
I see.
would probably be, we could bring that as a comment on the policy to the committee, just because that would have pretty significant budget implications. One certification with Envision costs around $17,000 for an infrastructure project. And that's setting aside any of kind of the changes you have to make in the project because of Envision. So I think I probably wouldn't feel like we could make that change without getting council input on it.
Also, we would probably want to talk about the level of Envision that we're recommending
Yeah.
too. That might be. But yeah, I think absolutely we could make the changes around the restructuring, much more clarity around goals, the innovation, cutting edge leadership, the pulling out of the buildings infrastructure, and then it's that Envision level and faster, stronger requirements, I think is what we need discussion.
Yeah.
Um,
And I can see why you would want to do pilot projects around using the Envision tool. But as far as the intent and the goals, I think we need to just move forward with that.
And I will
And we
say,
are with all of our updates and everything, sorry.
yeah, and I was gonna say, just if we're piloting Envision with a project, that doesn't mean we won't be trying to use best practices in other projects. And as we focus on training for staff, hopefully we'll be able to incorporate lessons learned into projects, even if it is not necessarily the pilot project, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily take it as the pilot project is the only one that will think about sustainability. The idea is that would be incorporating sustainability into other projects, and would be learning from those as well as the pilot project where we're really digging in.
So we had a motion on the table.
I don't know if it's second.
I think it
just
Okay.
I think Anne seconded it.
Well, but I also don't want to slow this process down.
So, Alex, I have a question. Can I still make a motion, a different motion or no?
I'm figuring that out right now. If that motion is done.
I take back my second.
Okay. So then no second on Nancy's first motion, is that correct? Would anyone like to make a new motion?
Yes. Let me rephrase it.
Okay, yes. Hold on.
Take a minute for that. So I would like to motion for the building, sustainability building and infrastructure policy to go ahead in front of the council with comments from the board specifying the areas we need to be reworked, and possibly we would like to see it back in a month in front of the environmental board to revisit.
Like to second?
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Online, Keith, Thomas,
Aye.
opposed?
Yeah.
So the motion moves forward. Staff will present the policy to council with the recommended changes, or to the council committee with the recommended changes, and also please note the dissent comments and those, anything we'd like to do that.
And then, yeah, there is potential then it may not move to council if the committee doesn't recommend that. But either way, we will be sure to bring it back to the board in a month, incorporating input from the board as well as from the council committee.
Can you make the changes that we've discussed and then send out an email and we vote electronically. That's something we used to do with IATC.
Yes, I think there is strong, they really like us for these items to be voting in a public meeting versus electronically. So if it's a response to like a letter, that's been acceptable, but on something like this.
So at least this gives it the possibility of moving forward rather than, and then getting the changes we want rather than blocking it now and then just moving it forward next month.
We could call a special meeting, or we may be able to work through a schedule that would work with council, but we could call a special meeting just to go through revisions based on this discussion.
Tries to say, our suggestions and the policy will be on, and then maybe we can decide after that, how we'd like to move forward, if it can come back to us, or if we need to call a special meeting.
That sounds great. We'll plan to send out a summary and we can send out the video from the meeting and then I'll connect with Alex and Don on the next steps.
David. The next agenda item is the ICAP update. Stacy's going to walk us through where we currently are, and we're going to do some breakout groups to discuss it.
Right. Great, thank you, Alex. All right, we have over the last several months been providing a lot of updates on where we are in the ICAP process. Several of you have been part of our committee meetings to provide more specific input. And what we wanted to do tonight is actually start jumping into some of the ICAP updates and getting some initial feedback from the board. Before jumping into those questions, I will provide just a brief update on where we are in the process. The 4 questions we will be coming to you about tonight is around your thoughts around the length of the plan, how long of a plan it should be, our approach to redundant actions, whether we want to expand what we mean by community, and whether we should see the frequency of greenhouse gas emissions inventory within the plan. Before jumping into those 4 questions, just wanted to provide the brief update as well as let you know about some of the other work that we're doing on the plan. Over the summer, we have been reviewing all of the feedback that we received from the committees back in the spring and early summer. As a reminder, those committees were formed around specific focus areas, so natural systems and water resources, transportation and land use. We are beginning to meet with boards and commissions starting at the end of this month, where we'll present the proposed changes to the transportation actions to the Transportation Advisory Board. There'll be a number of other meetings with Parks, PPC, Equity, one other board. And then with that, TAB. Yes, TAB is the one at the end of this month. And then we'll be bringing all of their input back to you all for additional review and input. Also, we have been looking at other plans to see if they have come up with any good policy options that we want to include in our actions. Redmond and Bellevue are in the process of finalizing their plans right now, so where we might be able to bring in some good ideas from them, we are scouring those plans. We have also been going through the plan, looking at different ways to reorganize. We're starting to think about, right now we have municipal operations spread throughout the plan. Do we want to group them in one area, or do we want them more aligned with the specific focus areas that those actions represent? But just going through some other plan cleanup that we'll be bringing to you. And then we are starting to have conversations around some target areas. There is currently no target for municipal operations. The community well-being and resilience target, we can't measure. And so we'll be meeting with our emergency manager when he's back to talk through a measurable target there. And then with the park board, be starting to have some conversations around the tree canopy target and whether there's interest in adjusting that. That was conversations that started with the committee last. So a lot of work happening behind the scenes as we prepare to bring materials to you all and the other boards and commissions. So that is a very quick summary of where we are. There's a lot more notes in the memo tonight, but before we move into the questions for tonight, I wanted to see if you all have any questions about just where we are with the plan. Great. So tonight we're going to just dive into the 4 questions, and then I'll provide a brief summary of those questions, our thoughts around them. And then we wanted to try something new and have you all move into just a couple of small groups. So we'll have a couple people over here, a couple people here. Keith and Tommy can chat online and just wanted to try something new. And that's a chance for you all to kind of think through things as a group, talk through your ideas, talk through the staff recommendations, and then we'll come back, share out from the groups, and then move into a discussion. So just a different way to organize. So I'll go through those 4 questions, and then we'll move to our groups to talk through our thoughts. So the first question is around plan length. We currently have a 5-year plan. We have been talking about whether there would be benefit to moving to a longer plan. So some communities have done that. And I my list of the communities I talked about. I believe Tacoma has done that, and some other neighboring jurisdictions. The Urban Forest Management Plan is a 10-year plan. And so we see some benefits in moving to a longer plan. As you can see, it is a lot of work to update these plans. It is expensive. It is a lot of staff time. Having a longer plan would allow us to focus more on implementation. We also believe that we know the biggest areas that we need to be working on, buildings and transportation. We don't anticipate that changing over the next 10 years. Obviously, there are trade-offs with that. Circumstances can change a lot in 10 years. And so that could be challenging if we had a plan that was looking out a long ways. That would also take us many years past some of our initial targets in the plan. We did hear when we met with the Snoqualmie tribe in early September, they expressed some concerns around longer plans and just the changing circumstances. If we did decide to move to a longer plan, we would ensure we were developing very detailed work plans on a regular basis, and then also include some checkpoints within the plan that maybe could lead to us updating it more frequently than on that 10-year period.
Are you talking about 5 years versus 10 years or 5 years versus 20 years?
5-year plan, 10-year plan, or something in
Whatever.
between.
Okay.
Yeah, we had not anticipated a longer plan. I think that would probably take us too close to some of the further out targets. I'd be a little nervous about that, but we're open to that.
Asking what you're thinking.
The next one is around redundant actions. So within the climate action plan, we have many actions that also exist in other city plans. Most commonly in the mobility action plan and our new urban forest management plan. They are either word for word or similar concept, but with different wording. That can make things very challenging if we are going to report on those actions, or not having exactly consistent language can be complicated because we don't know kind of which action wins out if looking across those 2 plans. If one of the plans is updated, it may leave the action language in the other plan out of date. And so we have been looking at possibly removing redundant actions that would kind of streamline reporting. It would ensure there's not that inconsistency across the plans if action language changes. One of the challenges by doing that is the potential to lose the importance of what that action means for climate mitigation or resilience. I think there's ways that we could probably mitigate that by ensuring we're speaking to the absolute importance of those plans and actions working in tandem with the ICAP. But then maybe David and I aren't reporting out on them through the ICAP reporting. So that's kind of our second question to the group is, what do we do with these actions that are redundant with other plans?
I'm all about efficiencies, but I just had a question, which is, do we have the urban forest plan happening because of the ICAP goal? I think the mobility master plan was already started before the ICAP, but are we getting some of these other plans because of ICAP?
Yeah,
That's just a question.
yeah. Great. And then our third area is expanding what we mean by community and the community and community resilience and well-being focus area. This focus area very much is about people being prepared for climate change. We were having conversations with our committees and with the Snoqualmie tribe around several of the actions that are proposed for the ICAP update. For instance, dark skies ordinance and ones that improve the resilience and well-being of our wildlife, actions around salmon recovery. And they didn't really fit in the area, in the natural systems area. They don't align with the goal for that focus area. We thought that those types of actions may actually fit better within a community resilience and well-being focus area if we expand what we mean by community. We also feel like that aligns with a lot of the input from the environmental board that was incorporated into the comprehensive plan. And it would allow for this section of the ICAP to really bring in wildlife and the environment and what that means for their own resilience, but also in supporting our broader community's resilience. This could make the one challenge with this is it could make the focus area. We may end up with a lot of actions in there and kind of lose some of the intent around human resilience, especially our disadvantaged communities. It may just kind of complicate the meaning of this focus area. So just some things to consider if we look at expanding that. And then the last one is around the frequency of our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. I would say if tonight we're running short on time, this is probably the less of a priority because this one we can continue to talk about over the coming months. We are currently doing our inventories every 2 years. It is, David can speak to the time intensity of it. They are expensive to do. We work with a consultant, spend a lot of staff time gathering data as well. We've been trying to be as efficient as possible, either working through our regional collaborations at K4C or with our Eastside collaboration to work together on inventories and with the same consultant save on costs and build efficiencies. We are committed to doing regular inventories. It is what helps us check in on how we're making progress, both at the community level as well as our city operations. But we're interested in having the conversation of allowing for some flexibility of the regulatory of the inventories and whether we can leave the ICAP a little bit more vague and allow the staff to choose the most efficient timing for those inventories so that we can partner with King County or the Eastside cities or run our own inventory in the most cost-effective way. If we do want to leave the language a little bit more vague, we thought we could say kind of a maximum time allowance between the inventories, like 4 years or 5 years, if there was concern about staff just dropping the ball and not doing it. So those are the 4 questions. They are detailed out quite a bit more in the memo if folks have access to that during our breakout groups. But with that, we were hoping just to move into maybe three, and then Tommy and Keith, we could have you all talk online, and we would mute the room and reduce your volume. And then we would spend about maybe 15, 20 minutes, come back a little bit after 8, and just have folks share out from the group, and then move into a discussion, maybe question by question, but just as a way to help us organize our thoughts. You all up for trying this? Great. Yeah, great. And David and I can float around with you too. And then Keith and Tommy, if you guys have questions, just send a chat. We'll keep an eye on the chat. And I will keep this screen up so folks have those. I will, actually, I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. I'm gonna pause the recording. We will come back and debrief from our home. All right, we are starting the recording again. We're coming back from our breakout groups, and we'll do a quick report out. If each group can just summarize their thoughts on the 4 questions, and then we'll just move to open discussion. We don't need any decisions tonight. We're really just looking for input, and we'll flag other items that we need to bring back from this discussion to the group. So maybe Keith, Tommy, can we start with you all online? Hope that works okay for you.
Yeah, Tommy, do you mind if I share out since like I said, I was taking a few notes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, we started with one. I think we talked about it a little bit and you shared some ideas and kind of came up with I don't know if it's been brought up, you know, we thought about is it possible to kind of split the difference between 5 and 10 years, and we were wondering if there was some kind of trigger that you could kind of have a longer uh, you know timeline for actually updating, but maybe something triggers a shorter timeline, and we were wondering if there's any possibility of a regular review of the climate plan. That maybe the environmental board or someone like us weighs in and says, oh, it actually things have changed a lot and we ought to do the update sooner. And that seems like it'd be a lot less expensive than a regular refresh if we just had it on our agenda to do so every couple of years or something. But wanted to throw that out there. And then number 2, representing redundant actions. That sounded pretty good to both of us as long as there's strong cross references that I will be sure to catch and make sure we're discussing as it's pertinent. It'd be nice to know a few specific examples of those redundancies just to better understand what's at stake by removing them. But yeah, we couldn't really think of any reason why we'd be too concerned as long as there was something in there that made us definitely understand where to look and what to consider if it is removed, and we still need to reference that. And then I think we didn't quite get to 4, but we talked about 3 for a while. I think we were both just kind of sharing a lot of ideas and kind of split on just thinking about the definition of community and expanding that into environmental neighbors, I guess, and kind of the philosophy behind that. I was think I was starting to get into a little bit, but then took a step back and thought maybe this is just more of a categorical concern right now. We're taking things that don't quite fit under natural systems right now and just bringing them under community resilience. And so I guess we just wanted to make sure we understood correctly that this is just taking items like that dark skies initiative and items related to salmon resilience and that don't fit so well under natural systems, putting those under community resilience, and that's kind of the extent of the expansion of defining community. So yeah, just wanted to make sure we were talking about that correctly. But yeah, I think that's about as far as we got. Didn't really delve into 4.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you. Which group, Alex, whenever your group go?
I will do that. So preferred length of the plan, we thought similarly, that we would only go to a longer plan if there was a way to trigger something in order to review it or to provide it. It's climate action, climate things moving at such a rapid pace, there could be some stuff that needs to be reviewed more regularly than a 10-year basis. As far as redundant actions go, we thought that they needed to be called out in some way so that they're not lost, whether or not that's putting them into something like an appendix, referencing them or highlighting them within the section or using very specific language to call them out, but making sure the ICAP, it was known that that was the minimum and other plans needed to either meet that or go above and beyond.
Okay.
As far as expanding community to encompass wildlife, we kind of briefly touched on just the rabbit hole that could kind of open up potentially. And that actually, Kaj, you had really good language around it.
So yeah, it means we all agreed, expanding the definition of community, but I do see the cons of, like once you expand the definition, you can have a long list of actions which might fall into it and really lose the focus of the work. So I was wondering if you can use some specific language, something like this section outlines focus areas and proposed actions that closely align with and are priority, are closely aligned with the broader definition of community and are a priority. So basically, you expand the definition, but also you still limit it only to the specific actions or areas you want, as opposed to just opening the door to anything.
And then as far as specifying the frequency of greenhouse gas emission inventories, we, I think, thought along the lines of putting the maximum on there that staff should be able to be flexible with it along with the surrounding areas to take advantage of that, but that it should go beyond a certain amount of time. But there also was questions as far as like what is happening around us with cities, who else is doing what. David mentioned that some CIO Bellevue are doing the annual ones, which is probably too excessive for Issaquah, but what are we doing with the other ones? And is there potential just to get on a schedule with the other east side cities maybe, to make it more regular and leave it like that? But
So if I can just add one
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, I mean, my first thought was it should be annual because all industries, businesses, everybody does it annually, but city is a different thing. So, I would like to be still reasonable to the extent where see the changes on a regular basis on an extended timeline. And I'm not entirely sure what that is for cities. So that's why I was asking David that question, like how much difference do you see every 2 years? Or again, there will be a trigger. EV surges, regulation changes, these things will matter for the GHG inventories also. So there should be some language on the trigger as well as the maximum cap, what you have to see the GHG inventory.
I do want to clarify, I was wrong. Seattle does it every 2 years. Bellevue does it every year. Currently.
I just, something I thought of that we didn't talk about in the group, but anyway, that we should be working towards having a list of things which are easy to measure because somebody measures it already, like power use. Okay, well, all right, that's already, so let's get that pipeline of things that are easily measured already. And so we have at least a benchmark that can be reported on a yearly basis. It's not the whole story, but it's part of the story. And it can at least give us a clue as to what direction we're going in some segments of the tally.
Great. and the last group. And
All right, so for number one, we all agree 10 years, 9 or 10 years is great. If we did 9 years, it would put it at 2035, which might be interesting. But we also agreed that 10 years is good because we like efficiencies. We want the city to be able to put all of their money and all of their time and focus into doing measurable things, actually reaching our goals to reduce greenhouse gases. And then also Jonathan thought that the data was just, there was just too much data he said something about the data.
I didn't think it would change significantly.
Right. Yeah, we need more time. But we would like to be written in that there's a possibility of an amendment if something changes. If we see there's a big change, then we can just go in and make an amendment. Or just, have a check-in every couple of years.
And then a major revision.
Yeah, major revision every 10 years. Yeah, maybe 10-year plan. And then number two, so how should we address redundant actions? Collaborate on language is what we said first. And then we also thought have like where you see there could be redundancies, have the ICAP give higher level language as the goal of what they want, and then in the plan assign the implementation to whatever agency would do it best. So it's not a lot of overlap. And by the way, Ann Fletcher is going to love this. And number three, should we expand community to encompass wildlife? Yes, we think so, yes. And number four, should we specify the frequency of greenhouse gas emission inventories? Yeah, it should be longer from our perspective. And I think that's where the data came in. Sorry, I got those mixed up. Yeah, maybe it could be every 5 years or 10 years, but it could also 4 years, something longer than 2 years for sure, to save money and time. And then there could be the potentiality of working with the other King County cities and working out a plan where it's more staggered, especially the ones where we're all kind of doing the same thing. Just see, so we've got an idea of what's working and what's not working, because we're working with the other cities to see how their greenhouse gases are going down or going up.
Yeah, and I think you all, maybe the other group talked about too, but discussed the idea of triggers for greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So if there was a major development, or I think you mentioned a forest fire, 50% of the central Issaquah plan is implemented, that might trigger a greenhouse gas inventory. So, yeah, it sounds like you all talked about.
Yeah, or maybe something happens where we reduce emissions.
Yes. Or some new state or federal policies come into play or something. So yeah.
Yes, could be that. So we're open to the amount of years, the schedule. But definitely want your time and Issaquah's money to go towards reducing greenhouse gases and working with other King County cities, which you already do.
Fantastic. Those breakout groups work better than I would have thought. So that was really, really helpful feedback. We are getting short on time, so we could do a really quick discussion. I can just kind of summarize what I heard, and then we'll obviously be coming back to you on many times.
We heard was similar.
Pretty consistent, yep.
Is there anything that's not to say on to the next agenda item? I just had one question. What is, we report annually still, right? That's not, we're not changing the reports.
Yep. Yeah, and then I think part of what we'll build in is that more detailed reporting along with the budget cycle, because when the original ICAP was passed, we were in the biennial budget. So we'll be building. But yeah, I think as a quick summary, we heard there's potential comfort going to a longer plan as long as we have some really good check-ins and triggers on a shorter timeline. Generally speaking, comfort in that. Redundant actions, a little bit of, I think some folks were comfortable maybe removing those as long as there's strong reference. I think some of the other groups wanted to still see them embedded, but better coordination. So I think that's something we can continue to talk about. One thing I mentioned to the group is we can even look at those as a board action by action and say which really don't need to be in here, which do we need that coordination with. So there may be some balanced approach there. Folks seemed in general comfortable expanding the definition of what we mean by community, but being very specific in the definition of that focus area to ensure we aren't just opening it up for all kinds of actions. And then there seemed to be strong support for allowing flexibility for the frequency of emissions inventories as long as we have some triggers, strong coordination, and that we have kind of a maximum time between them. Great. Fantastic. Thank you. Folks have energy to move last 9 minutes into our last topic. It will be quick. Okay. Let's see if I can bring it up because my computer is still sharing that. Share. Okay. I don't know where that's sharing. Okay, I'm not sure. That is not pulled up on my screen, so I am. See, David, can
Yeah.
I? Could you in this, let me see actually. Oh, 1 second. So I will just talk while we're trying to pull this up. What
I
we
have it.
wanted. So I don't know how to, there's something weird going on. You have it?
Do we have it? Do we have it?
You have it, so I'll just start talking. You got 8 minutes, 7 minutes, okay. So what we want to talk tonight about is the annual report self-analysis. I do not have the memo in front of me, but as a reminder,
This is the memo.
that's just the questions. Yeah, as a reminder, we are required to report every year to council, both a summary of the work that we've been doing, and then we are also required to do a self-analysis, kind of a exam of how well we think we've been doing. So we have followed the same basic structure since 2022, both for the report as well as for that self-analysis. We've made some updates over the years. So the board has asked us to bring that back in October in terms of the outline that we want to present to council, as well as the questions for the analysis, so that you all can review the draft results in November and then finalize in December. So that is what was included in your packet tonight. We are recommending the same outline structure for the report. There were 2 questions we wanted to ask the board. One was around last year, the board asked to present some of the concerns and recommendations going forward around board engagement, I think particularly in the urban forest management plan. And then there was also interest in sharing with council at the end of the year what our proposed priority work was for 2026. I will say the one caveat around that is we will have a new mayor. And so the new mayor will probably be looking at the board's proposed work plan and weighing into that finalized, but the board can absolutely express here is what we would like to be working on. 26. So those were, I think it was mostly a question for the report on whether we want to incorporate those same 2 sections that we included at the end of last year's report. And this is something you all can provide feedback on later. And then the other real priority was for our self-analysis, if there's any proposed revisions to the questions or additional questions we'd like to ask this year. Otherwise, we'll stay with the same survey we did last year.
So we're gonna all fill out that survey.
You will all do a survey again.
When we do that?
We will actually send that out to you probably next week.
Okay.
Because we would like to get the results back in time to include them in our next meeting packet. So it'll be about a 2-week turnaround to have you all complete that. Should take 10-15 minutes.
Yep.
So if folks have, we can start maybe with the self-analysis first. Did folks have any requested changes to the survey questions? Anything? If there is anything you'd like to add, please feel free to send that to David and I over the next few days. We can run those by Dawn and Alex. And then for the report structure,
Just as a comment
yes.
on those things.
Yeah.
Make sure you're talking about 2026. You got a couple of dates to look at.
Okay.
And your questionnaire to us.
Oh, yes, we just, I think we included last year's.
Okay.
now. So
I
yes,
just,
we're,
when you're
we're
looking
just
at
wanting
it,
to update it.
26. Okay.
yeah, I think we sent you last year's. Yes, we will double check that. Yeah, and then for the report structure, if there are any recommended changes for that, please let us know. It does really follow what's in our roles and responsibilities in the city code. But there were those 2 final sections that were kind of the board's message to council. We can also discuss that at our November meeting if we put any language there and what we want to say, kind of a statement to council. If folks did have a chance to look at the board outline, any proposed changes? Great. Well, in terms of next steps there, you will see a self-analysis come out from us probably next week. We have to work with our communications team on that, so maybe a little bit after that. And then we'll be looking for you to complete that by early November. So we can run the report and present it to you all at the next meeting. And then for the board report, we will prepare a draft for you all to review and provide feedback on in November, and then we'll plan to approve that at our December meeting. Okay. Yep, other real quick updates. We don't have either of our youth members here for updates. Julie provided an update on the PFAS work that's underway at the city. You may have noticed some work happening at IBE and Dodd Field this summer where they were taking some samples. They'll be taking, this is Department of Ecology, they'll be taking samples at Memorial Field this fall. Likely won't have any results of that work until late spring, sometime next year. Julie is very open to coming back and talking with the board once there's information to present. The ecology will be holding some more community meetings later this fall. I believe to share those out. Other real quick updates is Monday, City Council did approve somewhat reluctantly the tree code. They have requested it to come back next year with additional updates. We talked about this at the last meeting. I anticipate Minnie and her team will be working further with this board on proposed revisions to the tree code. Next week, we will be planning to go to council committee to share the board's input on the sustainable building and infrastructure policy. And as we talked tonight, we'll share the results of that meeting and next steps. On Wednesday next week, I hope everyone can attend. We are doing a town hall with the mayor on climate action. We will also have the executive director of King County Library Systems presenting on their climate action plan and the work they're doing. You should all have a hold on your calendar for that. Can I get a quick show of hands of who is planning to attend? We will probably send it out as a special meeting. It's gonna be, yes. So it looks like at least 4, we may send it out as a special meeting just in case.
I could be in 2 places.
I know. Tell me to say that. And then last 2 items is we have our tree giveaway happening. If you're an Issaquah resident, you can get free trees. I don't remember if we've sent out that link before, but I'll make sure you all
You
have.
can share it
that.
out, even if you don't live in Issaquah, but if you know somebody who does, share out the tree giveaway. We're about almost 2/3 of the way through. So trees.
Send that out. And then, as discussed earlier, we will be having our first meeting with one of the other boards and commissions to vet climate action plan actions at the end of this month. That'll be with the Transportation Advisory Board. So we'll be bringing the results of that discussion to you later this fall or early 26. We dig into action.
Just one question. Did you send the invite for next week's meeting? I don't have it on my calendar.
Yeah, I'll send that back out. Yeah.
Can you?
Yes, absolutely. I will send that tomorrow with our we have a new flyer that's sitting out there and the tree giveaway.
Do you have any sequoias?
I don't think so, but let me just pull up our list again. Oh, I got it right.
With that, we will adjourn.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tommy and Keith, for joining.
Thanks.